What if the one thing standing between you and world war just quietly disappeared? 32 nations, $1 trillion in military firepower, nuclear umbrellas stretching across 5 continents, 77 years of preventing the unthinkable. Now picture it being dismantled, not by an enemy, by us. And not with a bang with a pen stroke, a procurement order, a legal clause buried where nobody looks. The people making this trade, they are betting your future, your kids' future, on something that has never not once been tested under real pressure. Today is April 25th, 2026. Open any news app right now. The headlines look clean. Oil is stabilizing. Ceasefire talks are holding. The market is green. Go ahead. Take that breath. Because underneath those headlines, in classified briefings, in back-channel phone calls, in procurement orders buried on page 47 of documents, nobody reads something historic is happening. A restructuring of American power not seen since 1945. Most people won't notice it until it cannot be undone. This is where I need you to stop scrolling. This is not a political story. Not left, not right. This is a story about architecture. The invisible architecture that kept your grocery bill from doubling every time 2 nations aimed missiles at each other. The framework that kept oil moving, cargo ships sailing, and nuclear arsenals pointed but never fired for your entire life. And your parents' lives. And their parents' lives. That architecture is coming down. Quietly, legally, piece by piece. Something is being built in its place, and you need to see what it is. To understand what's happening right now, you have to go back, not to last month, not to last year. All the way back to the morning of April 4th, 1949, 12 nations, 1 room, Washington, D.C. They signed a document that said something that had never been said between sovereign nations before. An attack on one of us is an attack on all of us. Not a trade deal, not a business arrangement, not a handshake between kings. A covenant, built not on profit but on survival. That document became NATO, and what it survived should stop you cold. It outlasted Stalin, outlasted the Soviet Union, held through Korea, through the Berlin Wall going up and coming down, through the Cuban Missile Crisis, when the world had its finger on the trigger and pulled back. It held through the collapse of Yugoslavia, through genocide on European soil, and then September 12, 2001. The morning after the worst attack on American soil in modern history, every European ally did something they had never done before and have never done since. They invoked Article 5. Not to protect Paris, not to protect Berlin, to stand beside us. That was NATO. Now fast forward, November 2020. President Trump designates Saudi Arabia as a major non-NATO ally. Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman lands in Washington. A defense pact is signed. And then the announcement that made military analysts go silent. F-35 stealth fighters, the most advanced combat aircraft ever constructed, approved for sale to the kingdom. Let that land for a second. These jets were previously reserved exclusively for democratic allies, nations with verified oversight, institutional accountability, countries like Japan, Australia, South Korea, nations we spent decades building trust with before we handed them the keys. Now they're going to a monarchy. No parliament, no elections, no free press, no independent courts. But the deal is signed. The jets are approved. February 2026. Iran fires. Hundreds of missiles and drones erupt across the Persian Gulf simultaneously. Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Qatar take fire. The Strait of Hormuz, the narrow choke point that 20% of the world's oil passes through every single day, becomes a live combat zone. Washington responds fast. March 20th, 2026. Secretary of State Rubio invokes emergency powers under the Arms Export Control Act. $23 billion in weapons, air defense batteries, radar systems, precision-guided munitions pushed directly to UAE, Kuwait, and Jordan. No congressional hearings. No floor vote. No public debate. $23 billion. The stroke of a pen. Done. Now here's where it gets serious. Every single NATO ally refused to participate. France, Germany, the United Kingdom, Italy, Poland. All 31 of them. Not one warship, not one mobilization order, nothing. And before you call that a betrayal, hear why. They weren't consulted. No vote was taken. No alliance discussion happened. They were handed a war that wasn't theirs, started without them, and expected to bleed for it. That's not how alliances work. That's how empires work. This is where things change. Trump's response was not a diplomatic call to Berlin, not a conversation with London. It was a public statement to the Telegraph. He is, quote, strongly considering withdrawing the United States from NATO entirely. And when asked, would a ceasefire change his mind? His answer, oh yes, I would say it's beyond reconsideration. I was never swayed by NATO. I always knew they were a paper tiger. Paper tiger. Pause on that. Paper tiger. The alliance that answered our worst day. The alliance that held a nuclear standoff for 40 years without a single warhead fired in anger. The most successful security partnership in the recorded history of the modern world. Paper tiger. Those two words landed in every European capital like a bomb. What happened next is the part nobody is covering. Europe didn't panic. Europe got to work. Within weeks, quietly, urgently, senior defense officials across the continent began accelerating a plan that had been developing in the shadows since mid-2025. A European command structure, independent, self-sustaining, built to maintain deterrence against Russia with or without a single American soldier. And then came the detail that should make every American pay attention. Germany backed it. Germany. The country that spent decades resisting this exact idea. The country most deeply, most stubbornly tied to American military leadership. The country that more than any other believed in the transatlantic bond. Germany is now building the exit ramp. Not because they want to leave, because they are preparing for us to abandon them. This is the real turning point. And I need you to sit with this because it changes everything. Two visions of American power are colliding right now, in real time, at full speed. Vision 1. America leads through alliances, through shared democratic values, through mutual obligations that bind nations with something no amount of money can replicate, trust earned over generations. 77 years of proof that it works. Vision 2. America leads through deals, bilateral transactions, strength measured in weapons transferred in contracts, signed not in the kind of institutional trust that holds when the bullets start flying. Here's the critical part. The shift from Vision 1 to Vision 2 does not require a declaration of war. It doesn't require a Senate vote. It requires procurement orders, emergency legal clauses, and a crisis just enough of a crisis to provide cover while the architecture quietly comes apart. That is precisely what just happened, and this is the real problem. The countries now anchoring America's new security framework, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Kuwait, they have no parliament to slow down an escalation order, no opposition party to demand answers when a weapons deal goes sideways, no free press to ask the hard questions before a trigger gets pulled. When the UAE privately lobbied Washington for a full ground invasion of Iran, PBS confirmed this in March. There was no democratic process to catch it, no committee, no debate, no vote, just a phone call, a weapons order, and American precision munitions, sitting in a warehouse, ready to ship. Let me pull back now, 30,000 feet, because this is where almost every news outlet gets it wrong. NATO was not just a military alliance. NATO was an operating system. The software invisible, automatic, always running that kept global stability from crashing for 3 generations. It set the rules of engagement between great powers. It made large-scale war between democracies mathematically irrational. It kept every major shipping lane on Earth open because any nation that threatened them knew it wasn't challenging one country, it was challenging 32. That deterrence was invisible by design. You never saw it working. You just woke up every morning and oil was flowing. Cargo ships were crossing oceans. Your gas prices weren't spiking because a general in Tehran made a midnight decision. The stability felt automatic. It wasn't. It was built. Now look at what's replacing it. Bilateral arms deals have no Article 5. No mutual defense trigger, no shared command network built through 50 years of joint exercises and interoperable systems. When a bilateral partner faces an existential threat, there is no treaty pulling America in. There's a contract. And contracts get renegotiated. Contracts expire. Contracts get ripped up the moment a new administration decides its priorities have changed. Treaties don't work that way. That is exactly why we built them. The difference between a treaty and a transaction is not a philosophical debate. It is the difference between a foundation poured in concrete and a lease agreement that runs out when the landlord changes. Now I'm going to make this impossible to ignore. Because I know how foreign policy sounds. Distant, abstract, something for think tanks and senators, until it shows up in your life. The IMF just slashed its 2026 global growth forecast to 3.1%. The reason? Energy price volatility, supply chain breakdown, instability in global shipping corridors. Let me translate that into plain English. Slower growth means fewer jobs. It means the business that was planning to hire 20 people this year doesn't. It means the one that was planning to open a second location holds off. And higher energy costs? They don't stay at the pump. They travel into every product that gets made, refrigerated, packaged, loaded onto a truck, and driven to a shelf. Groceries, medicine, electronics, clothing, baby formula, everything. The stability that kept those numbers from going catastrophic for 77 years was not luck. It was not coincidence. It was engineered, deliberately, maintained at enormous cost by alliances that made economic disruption too dangerous for any rational actor to attempt. When you dismantle that engineering and replace it with transactional deals, you are not just changing foreign policy. You are changing the conditions that determine whether your cost of living goes up or down, whether your job exists next year, whether the economy your children step into is expanding or quietly breaking apart. This is not abstract. This is your kitchen table. And the window to fix this is narrowing, faster than anyone in Washington will tell you. 3 roads are in front of us. Here they are. No spin, no agenda. Road 1, best case. The ceasefire holds. Pakistan's mediation produces a real, durable framework between Washington and Tehran. The strait stays open. Energy markets stabilize. Trump claims victory and deserves a share of the credit for it. But NATO is still fractured. Europe is still building its parallel command structure. The emergency arms deals are still unreviewed by any congressional committee. And the trust that took 50 years to build between America and its democratic allies has a crack in it that no press conference closes. America wins the crisis and quietly loses the architecture that made surviving the next crisis possible. That is not a clean win. That is a trade with consequences we haven't paid yet. Road 2, worst case. The ceasefire collapses. Iran escalates, harder, faster, and America discovers what every serious military strategist already knows. $23 billion in weapons cannot replicate 77 years of shared command structures, joint operational training, interoperable communications, and treaty-bound commitment. Bilateral partners hold until the pressure becomes existential. Then you find out the answer to the only question that matters. Are they partners or are they customers? NATO held through the Cuban Missile Crisis, held through September 11th, held through every test the last century threw at it. It held because it wasn't a deal. It was an obligation. You find out the difference between a deal and an obligation when everything is on the line and you need someone to answer the phone. Road 3, the hard road. Congress wakes up, reasserts its constitutional authority over war powers and arms sales, the exact authority the emergency clause was designed to bypass. A genuine bipartisan coalition forms, pushes hard for real NATO reform, fair burden sharing, modernized command structures, higher European defense investment while keeping the alliance itself intact. America strengthens both its Gulf partnerships and its Atlantic relationships, not as a zero-sum choice. As 2 pillars of one coherent strategy, it is the hardest road. It demands political courage that is genuinely in short supply right now. But it is the only road, the only one that leads somewhere your grandchildren will be grateful for. Here's what I can't stop thinking about. September 12th, 2001. The morning after the worst day in modern American history. European leaders didn't convene to calculate whether it was their problem. They didn't wait to see if there was strategic advantage in it for them. They didn't negotiate. They invoked Article 5. They looked at America bleeding and said, "This happened to all of us." And they meant every word. That moment, that unconditional, unrequested commitment didn't happen because of a weapons contract. It didn't happen because of an arms deal signed in an emergency session. It happened because of 52 years of standing side by side, training together, disagreeing, arguing, and staying anyway. Building something that neither side was willing to let go of because both sides understood what losing it would cost. It happened because of something deeper than money, something rarer than treaties, something that, once broken, does not come back quickly, if it comes back at all. The institutions are battered right now. The alliance is under the worst strain of its existence. The architecture has cracks in places that will take years to repair. But it is not gone. Not yet. What happens in the next 6 months, in the next congressional session, the next election, the next crisis that tests who shows up, will determine whether this becomes a chapter about resilience, or a chapter about the moment Americans stop paying attention. The window is still open. But windows don't stay open forever. And history, when it finally writes this chapter, will not record which party was in power. It will record whether the American people were watching, whether they understood what was being traded away, and whether they decided it mattered. I need your honest answer in the comments right now. Is America making a necessary, long overdue pivot to a new kind of power built for the world as it actually is? Or are we trading a foundation that held for 77 years for something untested, unaccountable, and irreversible? There is no easy answer, but there is a right conversation to be having. Have it below. I read every comment. The sharpest ones go in next week's video. If this gave you something your newsfeed didn't, hit subscribe, because every week, this is what we do. We follow the money. We follow the weapons. We follow the decisions made in the dark while the headlines keep you looking the other way. The next one goes deeper. Don't miss it.